A great musician once said, I can feel it calling in the air tonight, and I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. And that's what it feels like right now because it feels like the league, the draft, the NFL, a bunch of trades, everything is just on that precipice, that edge of anticipation, waiting for something to push it over the edge. And I don't know if we get there before the draft actually starts or if we have to wait till Thursday night for the commissioner to step out on the stage and declare the 2025 draft open. But it feels that way in chat. It feels that way on the trade block. It feels that way in the real NFL and the rumors about the draft. And we're just waiting for that one piece of news, that one team moving up or moving back, that one thing that's really going to just drive it into mayhem. And that anticipation is magical. I love it. And I also hate it at the same time. I don't know. That's how I feel. How about you, RJ?
I feel the same way. I just want to hurry up and get to Thursday so I know where some of these landing spots are.
Well, I mean, I feel like that's what's holding up a whole mess of things right now. So I think that the things that we wanted to touch on today were kind of close out any hot takes or major predictions we have that we haven't gotten to so far in the offseason before the draft comes and shakes everything up. But, and we mentioned this briefly last week, it feels like everyone's holding their breath on any kind of move right now. Like everyone wants picks, but nobody's really paying up to come up for them. Everyone's saying players are available, but they're charging prices as if some of these guys won't be replaced in a couple of days. Where, everyone's just holding their breath, hoping things hold or things change in their favor. And nobody's willing to accept sort of where things are and where things could go and move properly in that direction. I don't know. And that's why maybe there have been a couple, but it feels like there's been just like no trades of consequence since last week.
Yeah, that nothing of like real significance or importance. There were a couple of them done, and I completely forgot that some of those players changed hands.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it. So it would have been, two of the trades. So there have been 4 trades that have happened since last week. I know usually we do this at the end, but I'm just going to do it now. There have been 4 trades since last week. 2 of them were comp picks that were given in error, going back to the Packers. One was 2/3 for Dante Fowler, and the other involved Lil Jordan Humphrey, Mo Alley Cox, Dwayne Smoot, Jalen Johnson, and a 4th-round pick. Overshown was in there too, but that's a whole lot of nothing in trade talks. So nobody's trading anything of value, but everyone's got very valuable things on the block. Everyone's wanting something, and nothing's getting traded for that. So it feels like something's got to give, but the only thing that's going to make that thing give is the draft. And we were talking before opening up with this. Outside of the news that came across Twitter, I think today, that the Titans have informed Cam Ward that they will be taking him first overall, which is, frankly, the least surprising news that I think any of us have heard all offseason. So now the draft begins at 2. And the Browns, and what do they do? Is it a quarterback? Is it Abdul Carter? Is it Travis Hunter? Is it something completely insane like Ashton Genty? Is it an offensive lineman? Like, where do the Browns go? And because of what they should do, what they could do, or what they need most is 6 different things. Everything's kind of on the table for the picks after that too.
Yeah. I mean, I think other than defensive end, like Cleveland needs basically everything where there's like a high end talent. So the only thing that would be viewed as like an unnecessary selection would be Abdul, but like you can justify Hunter, you can justify even Genty. All you have to do is say, look at what Saquon did last year. A quarterback actually seems logical. I understand this isn't the best draft class for quarterbacks, but I'm wildly confused as to why the second and third team that are needy of a quarterback would pass on any of the quarterbacks.
Right. And again, you start wondering, are teams going to get too cute when it comes to some of these things and say, well, we don't take a quarterback at 2, we'll wait for 1 and develop them. But I forget who I saw say it, but it's a good point. Second round quarterbacks, while great in theory, are just really tough selections because you take them thinking, okay, because it wasn't a first round guy, I'm going to get some time to develop this piece. But they're close enough to the first round and they're still high profile enough that there's still that expectation that 6 games in, they're calling for that player to get starting time. And that's exactly the same as if you took him in the first round.
Yep.
So I feel like that's a bit of a misnomer for this too. So frankly, it's also misinformation season. Hey, if I tell someone Cleveland's going to take Carter at 2 and Hunter's there at 3, does that improve the odds of the Giants moving out of the picker or reduce it? This feels like everyone's made a phone call to everybody, and if this happens, I'm willing to do this. If this happens, I'm willing to do this, and it's just a massive flow chart that I'll tell you what, I would love to be in a war room for a draft one of these years, but I feel like it will be one of the more stressful, like largest pieces of webbed information that it would be an insane thing to run a war room.
I'd imagine they're going to be very chaotic this year. My expectation is like most players that it's obvious of a landing spot. Yeah, I think a lot of those players go the pick before. Like another needy team will jump up ahead. Everybody has a first round pick to do something with. So like they all have flexibility to move around in the draft. And it just feels like one of those weird ones where like if Shedeur doesn't go top 3, then like he probably goes 8 to whoever trades up right before the Saints. A lot of things like that. Like, does somebody fall in love with Armand Membu to the point where they go to 6 and take him, right ahead of the expected draft spot of the Jets?
Yeah, I think that's also a very fair point. And like you had said, like Abdul Carter is really interesting because, like you said, the Browns have Garrett, and putting a guy like Carter next to Garrett is doubling down on his strength instead of attacking a need, especially at quarterback with what they actually need in Cleveland. So again, I can easily talk myself into Travis going there, and I think consensus seems to be going that direction. So if it's Cam 1 and it's Travis 2, then you move to the Giants at 3. And they paid up for Brian Burns. They've drafted Thibodeau. They've drafted Aziz Ojulari. They've spent a lot of first-round draft capital on that other edge rusher position. And are you going to use a first rounder? I think it's 3 out of the last 4 years on that position. Even if it might be the right guy this time and a really, truly special talent, or do you deploy it elsewhere? But then, kind of, if you go to deploy it elsewhere, where do you put it? I don't know if, unless you're sold on any of the quarterbacks, are really, I'm sold in the top 3. I'll be honest, if I had to put a quarterback in New York, I think it's Jackson Dart at 3. Not that I would say he's a better quarterback than Shedeur, but I'm believing what I'm reading about Dable preferring Dart over Shedeur. And if you're looking for the quarterback who's going to potentially save you this year, that seems to be someone who's ready to step in right now. If you need to say, okay, similar to how Russ came into the league, of we've signed Matt Flynn to be the quarterback, and then, we drafted this kid, and this kid's going to take the job. We've got Russ, who we paid up to take this job, but Jackson's going to take it from him. So, again, they've given themselves, I guess, a baseline that they don't need to take quarterback, but I also liken it to draft day, where I can see these guys both saying, if we don't take a quarterback this year, we're not going to get a chance next year. It's going to be a different GM, different coach, different regime drafting for the Giants next year. So I don't think that's where Carter goes either. I think and I honestly think there are enough questions about every other position that you have to go quarterback there.
Yeah. I agree. I don't have I'm not tied to a particular quarterback, just take the position of need. It is the biggest need. Like, yeah, they have an established, not an established starter for them, but somebody that's established in the league and has proven themselves as a starter, and that's nice. But you need to look towards the future, and Russ isn't going to be around very long. So as long as they're looking at that, I think it's a good idea. I think this is the perfect place to trade out of. But I don't know how many people are really looking to jump in there. I don't know who has draft capital and a massive need for a generational edge.
I'll tell you, I don't know what it would take, but if it takes 11 in our first next year to move up from 11 to 3 to take Abdul Carter, I'd love the Niners to do it. Put Carter on the other side of Bosa, solve that position, grab your lineman with second-round picks, and start developing the depth you need to afterwards, and just solve that spot instead of trying to get cute with it and hoping that the third or fourth or fifth guy does it. Like, double down on a strength, elite pieces, and do what you need to do. But again, I think it's going to be a team like that. Maybe it's the Jets. Maybe it's I don't know. I don't feel like maybe Jacksonville pays a small amount to switch spots. These are all things that the Giants are likely hoping for. Again, word on people fielding calls today is a bit of a misnomer. Any GM that's not constantly on the phone, basically, as of 3 or 4 days ago through Sunday, really shouldn't have their job. But I digress. So if it's a quarterback at 3, you as a Pats fan, like, you're sprinting to the podium for Carter, right?
Yeah. It's debatably a position of need. I think I think that's like common sense. Like there's just that much of a gap between best player available, like in Abdul Carter and everybody else. So like yeah, I think that pick gets made. Since you did say we were doing hot takes, I would like to see Ashton Genty get drafted by New England. That would be fun and interesting. And then a couple of weeks back, like in our mock drafts, that is ideally who I would like if Carter's not available. Is Membo.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point about Genty and folks in this class right now. Because I think we've gone through a couple of iterations on this class. Like when we first started talking about it and I had my draft board up, I think I kind of went position by position and said, well, I think we've got, 2 or 3 first rounders here and 3 or 4 first rounders here, and kind of went around and said, I kind of count 35 to 40 first rounders in this class. But as we're getting closer to the draft, and as we're getting through pro days, and as we're getting some more details on these players, I feel like that number has slowly but surely contracted. And 15 was a number I heard early on, and 15 seems to be the magic number of where people feel we have first round talents in this. And if you're talking blue chip, no shit, these guys aren't going to miss. I think I've heard the number be kind of closer to 5.
Yeah.
And if your team is drafting 4th overall and you have your quarterback and you need to build around them, all you can hope is I'm going to get one of those blue chip items at a position that makes some sense for me and I can move on to the next round. Like just kind of get me out of this shallow area safely and let me move to the next pick. And I feel like Carter does that for the Pats. But now if Carter goes at 3, the Pats are stuck between, do I go offensive tackle where Membu might not be the best performer in college but has the best metrics? Campbell's the better performer in college, but we're worried about arm length. Genty probably is the best player available, but is at a position where I already have an established starter who is at least replacement level. So I can go from replacement level to elite, but how much does that help me, especially at a position that might not be my biggest need? It gets to be a conversation, a debate, and difficult. And for a first draft, I feel like that's not what you're looking for. You want to be able to kind of say, okay, I've made my first pick. I've got something to build off of. Let me move on to the next thing and kind of, I got through the first piece without too much difficulty.
Yeah, I agree. That's why if Carter's there, I think it's a fantastic pick. And like you said, like the blue chip, like the studs of the class, they're 5, maybe 7, and New England has like players at most of those positions, so it is very difficult. So hopefully Carter's there.
That just makes everything easier.
Yeah.
So 5 with the Jags also becomes very interesting because Bigsby seemed to take over lead back in that backfield. ETN obviously has, residual potential, but now again, is Genty going to go there? Is going to become a common draft question that gets repeated by whoever's hosting for your respective network over and over for the first round of the draft, basically from the second pick on. Like again, you could put a situation together where Genty goes to Cleveland. You could put a situation together where Genty goes 3 to the Giants, saying, we'll figure out quarterback. We have 2 veterans, and if we need to wait to the second round to take our guy, we will. But a Genty Tracy backfield makes a lot of sense, especially considering Tracy's pass catching abilities and previous experience as a pass catcher. Then, like you said, Genty at 4 is something that New England's looking at. Genty at 5 is something that the Jags are looking at. So basically, now we went from, hey, maybe a running back shouldn't be taken so high to, well, from the start of the draft, every single pick we're looking at, we're going to be thinking about a running back. Well, shit.
Yeah. I would hope that the Jags wouldn't consider that. They're definitely one of those teams, and we'll probably say it like as we go through the teams quite a few times. But they're definitely at a position to trade out, just because you know that there's a high likelihood that the Raiders end up with Genty if nobody else pulls the trigger. So anybody that does want him is probably going to be looking to trade into 5. I hate it, but it makes the most sense, and I see it mocked everywhere. But just Mason Graham, like, there's really no sense in them moving. Just take the stud interior lineman.
I mean, the other one that I've seen, which I like, but I don't know if they're going to have the balls to do it, is Tet.
That would be interesting. I mean, I've seen Tet mocked from 4 to 9 pretty consistently, like with a lot of the teams. So I like it. I mean, with all the Tet hate out there, we might be making a hot take, even still considering him in the top 10.
Yep. And again, even with BTJ, there's a feeling that Tet will be complimentary. And I see it less with BTJ than potentially others. But, hey, you've got a new offensive coordinator who excelled with multiple high-end targets and a high-pedigreed quarterback at his previous spot. Not a bad idea to give him the same thing in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I don't know. Then things get kind of pretty wide open. I feel like, 6, everyone's saying the Raiders. I think it's a repeat of what we've been saying, but kind of the top 9 feel somewhat settled, and then it becomes a Wild West after that. But, it's going to take some of these picks being made to settle in where the rest are going to go in the NFL. And then sort of what happens in our league. So again, sorry, a bit of a side track to start, but I don't know, just that's kind of what's been consuming my brain today when looking at the chat, because it felt like with some of the activity early on that we were finally going to see a couple of teams that have been, I won't say absentee, but, a little bit less involved in the trade market recently, step up and start making some swaps. And some things have been discussed, and maybe things were closer to a deal that could kind of light the fuse for more things to happen. But again, nothing really happened today. So, like I said, that got stuck in my head. But wanted to start going through the league and making some predictions for where things are right now, and then we can come back to see how things changed post-draft. Sound good?
Sure.
So, like I said, these are predictions, but I tried to make the takes on the hotter side, just because that's more fun anyway. And that way people can react of either, we're full of it, or, hey, that was interesting and they called it all the way back then. Like last year, I feel like one of my better takes was that Marvin Harrison Jr. may not be all that. That even though he was a bulletproof prospect, maybe we needed to pump the brakes on him a little bit. And I might have been a little bit right on that one, especially considering where things are this offseason. But, that's one that still a lot of time to go on that one. Not every great wide receiver broke out and just destroyed things in their first year. And regardless of that, he still had a pretty good first year for rookie measurements. But anyways, we aren't even to rookies yet. We're looking at what we have right now. And I'm going to start spicy. Your number one seed for the AFC and winner of the AFC North next year are the Pittsburgh Steelers. In our league, Pittsburgh will win the North.
That's interesting. I mean, he definitely has the defense to probably do it. The offense isn't terrible, but it's not super deep. It's possible, though.
I mean, just Lawrence, all he has to do is get the improvement that comes with having an offensive head coach that allows him to thrive in the system he's got to do. And then think about what made Baker successful in Tampa. It's that he had strong weapons to throw to, a passing system that allowed him to both get the ball down the field as well as run when needed. And from a physically skilled standpoint, I would put Lawrence ahead of what Baker has. Baker just kind of processes things and acts a little bit faster than Trevor does. So I feel like the offense that Cohen runs lends itself more to Trevor's strengths than to Baker's. And if you start there and kind of go down on that offense, like he's 2 deep at running back, 3 or 4 deep at receiver. Jonnu had 200 points, and he still has Dalton Kincaid at tight end. And like you said, that defense, like he just needs to add 1 or 2 more pieces, and he's off to the races. And he has draft capital to go do that with. That we're going to get into that portion of the draft. Somebody's going to get thirsty, and he's going to add a starter at a defensive position to kind of round things out for his second round pick.
That is possible. That sounds like it would be a good move to make. So I do agree. I think that is a hot take. I'm not necessarily in agreement with it. But I'm also a little bit down on James Cook right now, just because of the exact timing. We know he's not at voluntary minicamp or whatever. So we don't know what the future holds for him. And running back is a position that's kind of difficult to buy in. So if he has James Cook, the top 10 scoring running back or top 12 scoring running back, yeah, it's not ridiculous, but I don't know if I see him beating the Bengals. So I would agree that is a hot take.
Well, I'll get to that in a second, because second place in the division, I have going to the Ravens, because I think their depth leads to them having a top 5 offense. It's a Goose-style running back room, but he's got the RB2 on 5 or 6 teams. Now, I just started this episode talking about how you're going to see players holding positions and losing those spots when a player gets a name called on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. That said, I think these are actually kind of pretty safe.
Yeah. I mean, that one of my takes is that only running backs in the first round will actually be starters this year. Everybody else will be at best in a committee. So I agree with that mindset.
And then probably my hottest take, especially considering what we were just saying in the power ranks a couple of weeks ago, is that despite going through this insane that the AFC has been on the lazy side this offseason, that you have division winners in the AFC West looking like the playoffs. The Browns will miss the playoffs and finish under 500.
Ooh. That is a hot take. I like it.
Let's see. Let me spread the love to other parts of the league. Conditional one. We talk about the Texans probably walking their way to an AFC South win. My hot take is that they will miss the playoffs. They will not win the South, and they will miss the playoffs unless they trade one of their big three on offense, and that would be Jahmyr Gibbs, Jamar Chase, or Devonta Smith, because they need depth behind those three. And look, I love Cedric Tillman, but damn if I know what the hell the Browns are going to do. And it looked like Judy was their number one. And if they take Hunter, he may slot into their two, which puts Tillman to the three, which means you have the number three quarterback, number three receiver getting passes from Joe Flacco. I don't think that's a recipe for success there. I love Jalen Coker, but again, the Panthers are primed to add a weapon or two in this draft. We'll see if he is able to hold his spot. Like, Texans needs to actually do something. And the only thing that's going to get him what he needs is to pivot off a major piece.
I agree with that statement. When you look at it, it looks like a really good team, but you know he's one injury away from being a non-playoff team. So I do agree with that statement, even though initial reaction, a lot of people would probably think it's a hot take.
Yep. And the team that I think wins the South are the Jags after their offense scores over 55% of their points next year. Now, again, that doesn't seem like a hot take when you look at that team. But if you look at how points got scored last year, and I think this was either you made this point or maybe it was the Commanders on a previous podcast. If you look at the percentage of offense versus defensive points scored last year, would you like to know which team had the highest percentage of their points scored by their offense last year?
Yeah.
The Seahawks.
Okay.
At 50%. Nobody else was above 48%. And that 48% were the Jags. So that means defense and special teams is where these points are being scored for pretty much everybody. So I think it was 75% of the league had over half their points come from their defense last year. So to say that the Jags are going to have 55% of their points come from offense this year, it's always great when I have to explain my hot takes, is a hot take. And that's the way things are stacked up. Mahomes, Jacobs, Ridley, Coleman, I think Musgrave, and then Strange will be solid at tight end. I think they've got enough depth and enough strength on offense to carry them. And at 12, I can only imagine Jags will double down on offense again.
Yeah, that would be my assumption.
All right. I've dominated the conversation so far. What hot takes are you pulling from so far, RJ?
I mean, most of mine are draft related. I think there's 3 running backs that go in the first round. I think, like I said previously, I think those are the only 3 that end up being starters throughout the season. As talented as this class is, there's not going to be a whole lot of turnover in the league. On the defensive side, maybe there's a lot of edge, but like running back, everybody's just going to go with what they normally do. I'd say probably about 90% of the league will be same player or somebody that's been on their roster, carrying the ball the majority of the time. So do we want to go deeper into that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so I do think Genty goes top 5. I think Omarion Hampton goes to the Cowboys. And whichever one you want, I think it's Henderson goes to the Broncos in the 20s. I don't know if that's a hot take. I know Cowboys with a running back at 13 seems to be a little bit more common. But I think both of the tight ends end up going before. Oh no, never mind. I was gonna say I think they go before they can consider Denver, but Denver has Ingram, and if you believe in Ingram, you know I think they gave him enough money to where they signified that they believe in him enough to where they don't view that position as a need anymore.
So I think this is a really interesting question at tight end this year, and Ingram is a good reason to bring it up. Is the more I feel like I'm looking at it, the more it's, and I think this was like 2 or 3 years ago, and I can't put my finger on who the tight ends were, but it feels like there's a pass catcher in Warren, and there's more of your standard tight end in Loveland. And it's from a fantasy perspective, everyone's thinking, oh, this is absolutely going to be Warren. He's the guy you want. He's going to catch you 80 times, especially if you've got any kind of tight end premium. That's where you got to go. Whereas then the counterpoint is, well, Loveland is a more complete tight end. He's going to be able to block. He's going to be on the field more. He's going to get options and play action, and he's more complete and going to be, the better performer. Maybe it was like the Kyle Pitts year, but I can't remember. I feel like I've had to make this distinction in past drafts, but I can't put my finger on which draft I'm thinking about.
Give me a second, and I can give you an idea. But I do agree. I think that they are different players. I think that it's more about like what kind of a tight end that you want rather than like who's the better player. Because I think they're both NFL ready. You put them up against a lot of the guys that came out recently. Pitts and Freiermuth was one year. Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta, Michael Mayer, they all came out in one year. Yeah, those are the most recent sets of rookies. Yeah, I think both of them probably go in the early to mid-teens, though. Like at the latest, I think there's potentially 3 tight ends that go in the first round.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And I think the depth is pretty good at the position too.
Mm-hmm. We'll probably have 6 of them taken in the first 2 days of the draft.
That feels right.
And they're all pretty decent. I mean, there is like a varying degree of like some are better than others, but they're all, gonna have jobs in the NFL for multiple years.
All right, here's one. Does a
Yeah.
Pro Bowler change hands in the draft this year?
I think so.
Yeah, I feel like usually we are hearing a name or two being bandied about as this player could be traded, this player could be traded, and I think it's wide receiver twos or depth positions, but when things aren't being talked about, that's when I feel like something's about to happen. Like every year, it's okay. This year, Brandon Ayuk gets traded for a top 10 pick, or Deebo Samuel's getting moved for a top 10 pick. Like the last time that actually happened, where everyone was expecting, okay, this player is going to get moved for a pick, it was AJ Brown, and then that actually got moved for a pick. When they say they're not settled and they're trying to make some big trades, I wouldn't be shocked if the Cowboys are offering Micah Parsons to move up to 4 or to 5.
Ooh, that would be fun.
If you have the Jags trying to sort of just grab an impact player at the position, I like Mason Graham a lot, but I understand some of the detractors on him. There's not really an elite piece of need potential that's going to be there at 5. That's a no shit. You have to take this player. So, hey, do you take, Parsons or something with Parsons to move out of 5? Probably not down to 13. Probably going to have to go back further if you get anything back. But taking him and paying him becomes your 5th overall pick this year, and then Genty going 5 to the Cowboys.
That would definitely make the draft interesting.
And again, I think when that first tight end goes is going to be a matter of question, because to your point, you could probably make an argument anywhere from 4 back of that first tight end going. But I think there's better things for New England to spend it on, for Jacksonville to spend it on, for the Raiders to spend it on. Clearly, they've already got 2.
Right.
You can just keep going back and back and back and back. And it doesn't really make sense for a lot of these teams. So I could see a player like Tyler Warren getting discussed as early as, 4 or 5, and then not actually going until like 18.
It's possible. There are always those players that are identified as like, this is one of the better players in the draft, but they aren't at a premium position, so they sit as like the best player available for like half of a round. And that very much could be a Tyler Warren type of scenario. I also wouldn't be shocked if the Jets take him.
Yeah, and again, I know that's everyone's saying, "Oh, it's position in need," and that's who the Jets should take. But I don't know. I feel like you got a defensive coach, you got a organization that is trying to be taken a little bit more seriously after the train wreck that was Aaron Rodgers and what the previous administration did to kind of try and make him succeed. I feel like they're going to go safe and traditional with their pick, and it's going to be something. Again, I don't think they necessarily need a corner, but something like a Will Johnson wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, that'd be a fantastic draft spot for Johnson. Maybe not necessarily a place to play, but to be a top 7 pick, like he's definitely worth it.
But yeah, put him on the other side of Sauce. I think they've got good corner depth as it is, and just kind of, I would like to see teams this year, and here's my kind of draft hot take. I would rather see teams double down on a strength rather than fill a need in the draft. The right way to draft is you either need to build a strength or prepare to fill a gap next year. You can't expect a player you take in the draft to come in and immediately fix things for you. That doesn't work. What does work is allowing a strength to build on a strength and having that make a difference for you in the back half of the season. Or I've drafted depth behind this position so that when this leaves in free agency, I'm fine. Like, look at the cap situation the Eagles are in, and it's completely because they're always drafting a year ahead. So I'd love to see, again, Hunter go at 2 because the Browns have decent corners, they have decent receivers, but Hunter builds those into much better situations. Carter at 3, again, the Giants have a good situation. He makes it potentially elite. Tet going at 5 takes you from 1 elite receiver to 2 potentially elite receivers at those positions. And if you hit the wide receiver 1 2 straight years and have a former first overall pick throwing the ball, guys, that's what Tampa's had for the last 8 to 10 years. And that hasn't been a bad situation to be a part of. They've always been competitive for the playoffs and been competitive for a couple Super Bowls in the run of things. Yes, it took a guy named Brady to do it, but that's not an offense you want to bet against once you kind of get those things set up. So I really want to see teams double down on a strength rather than try and say, oh, I need to shore up this position in the drafts where I can go do it.
Yep. I mean, it's like that's from a position of power. Some teams in the league aren't necessarily from that like position of power. I think there's a pretty rational debate for multiple different approaches or strategies with drafting. New England's has been successful just drafting need for a lot of years. And there's a lot of teams that have been successful just drafting best player available. Like, look at Baltimore. It's more, I think, just as much as finding a strategy that is good is like sticking with that strategy. Like a lot of teams don't lose interest in players way too early, regardless of draft capital.
No boy. Well, we'll see if this happens while we're actually still on the pod, but the Giants just posted at Kamish. So, like I said, that first trade that creates the trickle-down waterfall of action may be taking place as we're talking on the pod here. So let's see if Packers or Bengals are paying close enough attention to process this. I mean, this would be a great time to have a trade czar able to process this so we could talk about this on the pod. But, that's something we'll just have to hope for a little bit of luck here.
Well, hopefully it's a good, exciting trade.
So I don't know if this is hot take or just other prediction. Where do you expect the first sort of complete head scratcher pick to happen, and who do you expect to do it? Like, usually, like I'll give the example. Like a couple years back, it was the Raiders, I think at like 4, taking Cleveland Farrell. there. It's like, okay, I expected Farrell to be a first rounder, but 4? What the fuck?
Right. I don't know. That's an interesting one. Probably Miami, because they have so many issues that they need to address, and I just don't think that they're going to address it correctly. So what is that, 13 if I'm not mistaken? Yeah. That's my expectation. And probably the draft goes off the rails at that point.
Yeah, let me pull up the chart to see who's got where. I'm going to go earlier. I'm going to go Carolina.
Okay.
The reason I say that is they've got so many directions they could go. I don't feel like there's any position outside of quarterback that Carolina would pick and they would say, wait, why are they drafting that? Like with Brooks going down with another knee injury, and even though they've re-upped Chuba, it wouldn't be a shock if they took running back. Wide receiver, they're saying they could use another guy to complement Leggett. Tight end, they just re-upped Tremble, but it's sort of first or second tight end money. And again, they have Sanders there, but again, it wouldn't be wildly shocking for them to say, hey, it was a day 2 tight end. One of these guys is elite, so it'll be Sanders and this guy. And then Tremble. Again, it wouldn't shock me. Line wouldn't shock me. Defense wouldn't shock me. But it feels like they're going to go and get, like, I don't know, the D end out of Boston College and say, that's the guy we're taking at 8. And everyone's going to be sitting there saying, wait a second. He's like my 5th or 6th D end. He's not bad, but really he's 8?
That's fair. I think that position as a whole is going to be the one where people are shocked and confused when certain players go over other players. And yeah, it's one of those where like teams will just have a preference, and they just, oh, we can't find a trade partner, so we're just going to take like the defensive end that we want at, let's call it what did you say, 9 or 8 Carolina?
8.
Yeah, like they'll just take Donovan. I'm not gonna attempt the last name, but that was the guy you were talking about from Boston College, right? Yeah, like 27 other teams may perceive him as like the defensive end 4 and going 28th overall, and they may just take him there because they just can't find a willing trade partner.
Right, and hey, sometimes that works real well. Look at, and again, it's still to be determined, but the Falcons were certain Penix should go ahead of McCarthy. And then the Broncos move up. Oh my God, they got to get ahead of Milwaukee, ahead of Minnesota for McCarthy, and then they take Nix. Like, again, a lot of times when this happens, it's not a completely wrong take. But yeah, I feel like that's where I think we start seeing things go sideways. Otherwise, it's absolutely going to be San Francisco at 11. That everyone's going to say, all right, this lineman's here, this defensive edge is here, this is what we do. And then they go take like Walter Nolan. And everyone says like, what? Or Luther Burden or something like that. Like they go a direction, everyone's like, wait, like I don't hate they went that direction, but really? With who's on the board, that's who they're taking? But we've got a history of those things. God bless John Lynch.
I do agree with you on that. Like San Francisco's potentially could do that. If they do go that route of like mildly confusing, taking somebody slightly early, I fully expect them to take what is like the second or third cornerback, and like I fully expect for all of us to be shocked and confused when the draft happens, and then also shocked and confused as he is a Pro Bowler for like the next 8 years, whoever it is.
Yeah, like again, they've had him come in on a top 30 visit, and look, I won't hold it against the kid that his name is this, but as a 49er fan, I don't think I can abide another Kyle Williams on my team. For those of you who aren't diehard fans, back in the early Harbaugh years, we had an opportunity to make the Super Bowl in the championship game for the NFC against the Giants. And Kyle Williams muffed not one, but 2 punts to allow the Giants to tie the game and then to put the Giants in field goal range to win the game. It was enough of a story that Giants fans were wearing Kyle Williams jerseys to the Super Bowl the following week, which, let me tell you, I was a huge fan of. I'm lying, I was not a fan of that.
Well, we had that trade processed.
Yeah, I saw that come through. So the deal that got done, Cardinals picking up another offensive piece, Travis Etienne for Audric Estime, and the Bengals 26 first. Look, good for Giants for getting a first for Etienne. This is probably the last time you could sell him, especially if Genty does go there, because that value is going to drop dramatically. And with that contract, I did not have that value on Etienne, but if he dodges well in the draft, then that's not a bad pick to pay to pick up a RB2 potentially in this new offense. And look, Cohen made Bucky Irving and Rachaad White into code 200-point running backs. So Etienne's got the physical skills to do something similar, but I don't like the player.
I love the player, but his value is more on the NFL field than it is for fantasy football.
So, hey, maybe that gives Giants some of the cap flexibility he needs and another first-round pick to go make a bigger move, because I know he's been big game hunting for picks in this draft. So maybe this is, like I said, maybe this is the thing that helps unlock some things happening. Or now that Cardinals has another starter at a position, potentially with Etienne next to, I think it's Jalen Wright at running back, he starts taking a different approach with some of his picks. So it could be that that first domino in the process here, but we'll see what happens in the next couple hours. So we've had some draft hot takes. I've talked about some AFC hot takes. I don't know. What do you guys think? Anything else that we want to really touch on at this point, or just kind of wrap up the pod so we can try and make some more trades happen?
I mean, I think we've hit all of the things that we wanted to talk about. Yeah, I would just tell everybody to send out some crazy offers before draft day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, Carolina has their entire team / picks on trade bait right now. Like, I get that that's kind of an obnoxious way to do it, but everything is available in Carolina. So if you want something, make an offer, and he's thinking about it. Pretty much, I'd say the 8 to 10 of us delinquents when it comes to trading are thinking very much the same way, with maybe one or two things on each roster that's off limits, if anything. So, look, we're all starting to pay attention again. Even the Ravens finally came back from their 23-day hiatus to look at their team. So, now is the time that if you're going to make a move for somebody that hasn't been paying attention, they might be finally paying attention again. So go get that stuff done. And look, I don't know if we'll go live over the weekend or if we'll have enough content to do it, but I feel like we'll probably have a couple of pods next week to recap what we've seen in the draft so far and talk about what we think about how that has repositioned teams. And frankly, unless I made some major trades by that point, I'm trying to figure out how the hell I'm going to make all my picks or how the hell I'm going to trade half of them. But that's future Mike's problem.